everyone. It's been a long time that we didn't have a live stream yet, and today finally we are having one with Shivai from Pieces. He's the head of the developer relations from Pieces, and we are glad to have him here in our channel. And today we will be discussing about how you can code faster, and we will also be building a live web application and checking out the implementation of pieces in our daily lives while coding. Yeah. Over to you,
Um,
Shivaj.
yeah, thank you so much, Susmita, for inviting me over to this session. So I think like I can probably first start by sharing my screen. So I've already set up my slides. I'd like to just kind of give a very quick introduction to what Pieces is and how you can leverage that for your developer workflow, whether you're an individual developer or whether you're working with a set of team members in order to make your overall development process more efficient with the help of like the power of AI that is used throughout end to end within pieces, and how you can basically leverage it for not just your actual programming itself, like when you're hands on programming, but of course, how pieces kind of helps you not only from the ideation and from your discovery phase, for instance, like let's say if you're doing some research, but all the way sharing that same context from research to your actual programs as well. So yeah, I think you can probably start by sharing my screen. I've put up my slides. All right, perfect. So hello everyone. Again, quick introduction about myself. So I kind of lead the developer advocacy over here at Pieces, and I like to just kind of give first some context around why Pieces, and then of course you'll understand the need for a tool or a developer tool like Pieces in order to help you just become better at what you do when you're programming, right? So I think one of the most important things is to also kind of cover like what are some of the basic problems that developers commonly face when they are basically collaborating with each other, right? So when we kind of talk about like let's say any two developers, and one example, very simple example, could be like let's say you're working on a hackathon project with your friends from college, or you're working at your job and you're working on a team project where you're sharing a lot of code, you're collaborating with each other. Now generally the most common way that people might share code is with the help of screenshots or copying snippets of code and sharing it on Slack or Discord or any other modes of means of communication that you might have inside of your team. Now while that might be good enough for small codes or code snippets, but if you're dealing with code snippets like having hundreds or 200 lines of code and you're doing it on a very regular basis, then it can be a lot of context switching. It can become extremely difficult to manage all those codes because like let's say if you're sharing screenshots, then someone will have to look at the code, and if they want to like let's say run it, then of course they'll have to manually type out the code from the screenshot. Or if you're like just sharing the code on Slack, first the other developer might take some time to just try to understand like what that code perhaps does, because it does not have any context attached to it. It's just a code snippet. So if you're just randomly sharing a code snippet with someone, they might take some amount of time in order to just understand like what that particular code snippet is all about, right? So apart from that, of course, like it's also equally difficult to run and basically test that shared code, because again you don't have any context, what language it might be in, or what it does, how to perhaps implement it. So that essentially leads to limited collaboration. Like if you're able to find a better way of being able to share code with more context, that can definitely also help in better collaboration and better understanding of these snippets that are being shared. Similarly, when it comes to like a new developer and how they are being onboarded, so that entire process can also be extremely time consuming, because like let's say a new developer being access to a huge code base can take a lot of time to just understand what the different parts of the code does, right? And also is finding who is the relevant person in the team if you want to find help from the team. Like let's say you're working in a team of 50 members and you are working on a front end application in React, but then it might take you some amount of time to probably find someone who has the relevant experience. And of course, like solving bugs in an unfamiliar code base, especially for new developers, that can take a lot of time. So of course, like these are common issues that everyone faces, whether you're working in a production application or you're working even in open source. So even for open source projects, it can be a bit difficult to get started, understand what that code does. And of course, like if you are sharing code with context, so let's say if you had a way through which if you're sharing a screenshot of a code, or if you're sharing a code snippet, it has some added metadata, such as let's say who are the relevant developers with whom you could collaborate with, or it could have some additional context like a summary of what that code does. It might have some annotations such as like making comments on what that code does. So that can definitely help to understand code between amongst like team members. It will also enable for easier onboarding of new developers if the developers could simply just take a piece of code, and perhaps they might know who is the best person to reach out to for understanding that code. So it does help you in easier onboarding of developers, in just getting to know how to code better, right? So those are some of the main benefits that come with code snippet sharing. So that is why I like to kind of introduce Pieces. So essentially, Pieces is this AI powered developer tool that really helps create magic for developer productivity. So right from your research all the way to your actual development, there are a set of different functionalities that are provided by Pieces that allows you to get not only things such as your code snippets. So you can essentially go to any website, or you might be inside of your code in different types of code editors like VS Code or JetBrains, and efficiently store code snippets right over there in that one hub. And you can just leverage these code snippets where you want. And the great thing about these code snippets is that they are enriched with a number of different other meta tags, such as like the title, like a short summary of what that particular snippet does, some related people, related links, so that like let's say if you want to just understand what's going on behind the scenes behind that particular code snippet and want to learn about the relevant technology behind it, you'll get some relevant links that you can utilize in order to get better understanding and better context of that particular code snippet. And you can just very easily share it across with anyone. No need to create like GitHub. Just you can create like a cloud-based link, and you can share across it with anyone. Then of course this we have something called as the Pieces Copilot, which essentially like what Pieces Copilot does is that it leverages the power of large language models, both um, basically your standard large language models like GPT or Palm V2, and of course like upcoming support for Gemini, which are essentially these cloud based models. Or even you can use something like local large language models for more privacy concerned. For example, if you don't want to send your data to ChatGPT or to GPT, then you can also leverage incognito. Like you can, even if you don't have internet access, you can use the local large language models, popular models like llama 2, code llama, which can be leveraged to help you generate code snippets. You can leverage them to ask any questions about your code. And let's say if you want to summarize some particular code or annotate a code, you can very easily do that with the help of this Copilot. And this can be found across a number of different set of applications where you can leverage Pieces. So whether you're using like your browser, such as like your Google Chrome, you can leverage it over there as well. You can leverage it when you're using any kind of IDE, so things like VS Code or JetBrains. So you can leverage this particular tooling across every developer ecosystem. So essentially, you're having the power of not only being able to get relevant suggestions and relevant responses from these large language models right inside of your developer ecosystem, but of course, let's say that like in today's example, you start off with a discovery phase where you're kind of just doing a bit of research about a project that you want to build, and you find some relevant links that you might want to use later. You can set that context for like let's say that particular research that you have done, and then you can leverage that inside of your uh, development workflow directly. without having to do a lot of context switching and trying to remember, okay, like you might have looked up certain code or perhaps certain links that might come useful later. So all of the context switching or the context as you kind of skip between different projects, all of that is maintained and retained across your entire end-to-end developer workflow. So let's dive right into the actual product itself, and then of course we'll kind of look at what are some of the benefits when it comes to, like, using develop pieces, because of course, like as I mentioned, that it allows you to create these code snippets which can either be just project specific. It could also be just limited to a file, so you can basically set these context across different types of workflows. So if it can be limited to just a particular file, a function, or perhaps even an entire uh, directory as well, so that your pieces copilot has context about your entire end-to-end code, so you can ask it any question from your directory and it can basically give you relevant suggestions. So, and like that is what really helps empower developers, where you have this AI that has the context to your entire end-to-end project life cycle, and it can help you build and just become better developers, right? Become more and efficient and also at being able to multitask and share that context across the entire ecosystem. So, with that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at how you can leverage pieces inside of your project, like while building a project. And towards the end, we will just have a quick Q&A. So, if anyone wants to understand more, better use cases behind using like pieces, we'll kind of look at that as well. So, let me go ahead and share my screen. It'll just take me 1 minute. So, let's go ahead and see. Sushmita, if you can please add my screen to the stream. All right. Let me start to share my screen as well. I think this should be all right. So I think now it should be visible. All right. Perfect. So
Okay?
yeah. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay. Okay. Perfect.
It's
So
visible. Yeah, perfect.
yeah. Perfect, perfect. So now, what we'll end up basically discussing is that, of course, like if you first want to get started by installing pieces, so there are essentially two major components when you install pieces. Of course, you can install it for any of your IDs. For instance, like I'm using right now macOS, so you can install it for Windows, Linux, and macOS. So if you go ahead and install it, essentially, like for example, if you want to install it for Apple Silicon, let's say, because that's what my system is. So if you kind of start to install, what you'll basically get is there are two major components for pieces. So the two major components is the pieces OS and a desktop application known as pieces for developers. So let me just quickly give you an overview of what each one of them does, and then that should kind of help you to understand what Pieces OS is all about, and then of course what Pieces is, right? Pieces for developers. So Pieces OS is kind of like the major brain behind like doing anything that you wish to do on Pieces. So let me just go ahead and close this one and open up Pieces over here. Okay. So essentially, like Pieces OS is kind of like the main server which does everything from doing like things like code annotation, helping you create these code snippets, and of course like directly talking with these large language models in order to kind of do magical things like being able to just set the context for entire code for your entire project at the project level, or at a file level, or at a folder level. So it kind of runs as a background service. So it's something that will keep on running in as a background service, and you can basically of course like create your own account, and of course the other set of like which we call kind of the pieces suite is this PFD, which is the pieces for desktop application. It's a UI based the graphical user interface to kind of see all the different kind of code snippets that you have. So for instance, like I can take a look at all the different snippets in this list view. So you can see like all the list of snippets that I currently have in store. So starting off with something like this example where I have this JavaScript function for timeout to basically scale down an indicator after 3 seconds. So this is like the code snippet that I have created, and this is like a title and a summary that I have been able to generate with the help of pieces. So for instance, like let's say if you want to add a new snippet, you can have all of these different available ways in which you can add a new snippet. So for example, like let's say you want to get a snippet from an image, so even like really great OCR is capable. So for instance, like let's say if you wish to perhaps like add a new snippet, you can of course like either add like using a link. So for example, if I were to like let's say create one from scratch, you can also like create one from scratch. Or if you wish to import it from like let's say a link. So for instance, like let's say if I go ahead and go to github.com, and perhaps, or even like let's say react.dev, probably the React website, I can perhaps copy one of the links or one of the code. So like let's say I can copy this particular code, and I should be able to directly like let's say create a new snippet. For example, if I now go ahead and create a new snippet over here from scratch, I can add my code snippet and save it. So as soon as I go ahead and save it, as you can see that this particular snippet, as you can see, like it has generated a title for it, a description that this particular code snippet renders a list of videos with a heading that displays the number of videos. So this should basically give an example of like how you can set context, right? You can also leverage the capability of like adding a screenshot, and it will extract the code using OCR, and it's a very powerful OCR, and again set the context for it. Then of course you can either view it in the list view or in kind of a gallery view, right? Then of course the other major really great powerful tool is the Copilot. So this Copilot is where you can essentially chat with the large language models that are being optimized by pieces. So you can either use local models or even like cloud based models. So for example, in cloud based, you can use something like GPT-4 or GPT 3.5 or GPT 3.5 Turbo, or even Palm, which are by Google, or you can leverage some of the on-device models like Llama 2. So you can choose between them, and then you can like give it any kind of code, or you can ask it any question. You can set the context based on a particular file or a particular folder. And of course, like you can also leverage, like let's say if you have a screenshot. So that's like one of the major great things about pieces. So for example, like let's say if I just give it this one screenshot, and it has like some kind of documentation, so it will be able to extract the code from it if it finds any relevant code. So it can very intelligently do that. And then you can save it to pieces. You can also like go ahead and share that particular code as well, uniquely generate like a shareable link. For instance, like it is able to generate this entire code, so you can save it to pieces. You can basically find relevant people who might have experience. For example, like Jordan or Savo are relevant people who have perhaps experience in JavaScript, so you can reach out to them and get to understand. You can further like annotate the code. So annotate code will add like additional comments to your code, right? You can transform, like let's say if you wish to transform this code, so I can just say transform, like let's say this code to TypeScript. So we'll just wait for the response of the entire system, and then of course like I can ask it that, hey, like transform this particular code to TypeScript. So we'll just wait for this one to complete, and once it's complete, you can just say like let's say transform this code to TypeScript. So over here you can see that now it will convert it, so you can very easily like do basic things, essentially what you might find in something like ChatGPT. But of course, like the biggest difficulty over there is you cannot really just take your entire code base and add that to ChatGPT, right? Of course, like if you're adding some sharing some simple code snippets, you can perhaps do that. But the great thing is that now, like let's say if you want to share across this particular code snippet that you have just generated, it will create a shareable link. So for instance, like let's say if I go ahead and paste this particular link, So this connected to my pieces cloud account, and you can see the okay. So this perhaps gave like a faulty link. Let's try out it again. Let's go ahead and copy this and see if this works this time. Perhaps we can try to use some other code snippet. Let's just take one from like let's say this one. So if I now go ahead and get the shareable link, so let's go ahead and do this. Over here, for example, you can see that this is like a JavaScript code snippet that I generated. You can see like a description of it, then some related tags, and of course like some related links that might be relevant to this particular code. So this is like a high level overview of the pieces for developer UI application. Now, of course, like all these functionalities are also possible to get with a number of different suite of different areas where you basically get access to pieces. So that includes a number of different plugins for a lot of like popular extensions or developer platforms like VS Code or Obsidian, JetBrains, Jupyter Lab, and of course like you get access to it in your actual Chrome browser or like major browsers like Edge or Firefox as well. So now, without like wasting any further time, let's kind of get started with like a live project building, because that's where we'll understand that how, if you're like building a project or if you're working as a software engineer, how would you essentially leverage pieces, right? So right from the first aspect, which is usually research. So like let's say that in this case today, like what we are essentially going to be building is a simple note taking application with a front end, a back end, and a database. So the front end will be in React.js, the back end will be in Node.js, and of course like we'll use MongoDB. So if you're creating like a note taking application, like a full stack note taking application, now I do technically have a front end ready, because of course like in 1 hour it would have been a bit difficult to create everything. So I do have like a front end prepared for the application, and over here I'll just quickly navigate through the code. So this is basically our simple note taking application.
Shibai,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt in between. Are we going to code the backend? Like,
Yes.
will the
Yeah.
okay, great. That's great.
Yeah.
Cool. Continue.
All right, so we do have the front end already ready, but yes, like we'll be coding the backend. Now, just want to kind of set the context over here. So, and I'll just quickly also just try to run this application. It might probably just throw an error because you know it might not work out of the box. But let's go to the front end. So in this case, like the client directly, just to kind of explain the overall structure of my code repository over here. So in the client, I have my React code for the actual front end application, and then of course outside the client is going to be where my main backend will be there. So schema will be the MongoDB schema for designing like how would be storing our actual notes. Then the server will be where we'll be having all of our endpoints and to connect to the actual Express server. And connect Mongo will be a simple function where we'll be writing a script to connect it to a remote MongoDB URI. So in this case, like the client, of course, has a number of different components. So we have a footer, we have a header, and then we have a notebook, which basically is a note block, which will help us to create a note. And then we have a separate component which will take a new note input that will accept the author and then the note itself. So if you just kind of go ahead, and I will do an npm install to install the relevant dependencies, and then we'll just quickly try to run this particular part, and of course see that how we could leverage pieces when you're like building an actual application. So our end goal today is to kind of build a full stack simple note taking application. So let's go ahead and just run this with an npm start. It will serve on localhost 3000. So let's go ahead and quickly go back over here. All right. So of course, right now, I guess it's running.
Shibai,
Let's just wait.
is it hosted on GitHub like the code?
Yeah, I'll be sharing the code on GitHub, so don't worry about that. Like we'll be sharing, right?
You
Um,
can share it now in the comments so that people can pull it and quote along with us.
yeah, so actually I don't have the code uploaded right now, but yeah, probably I can do it right now if you find yeah. Let
Yeah,
me
okay, that
just
would be very helpful so that people will be coding with us and it would be interesting, right?
yeah, absolutely. So let me go ahead and create a new repository. Let's call it. So I'll just go ahead and create this repository, and I'll just go ahead and share it with everyone. So this is going to be the link. I'll be just sharing this in the private chat, so you can go ahead and share this, Susmita. And let me go ahead and quickly also
Sure. Yeah.
share this code. Perfect. Yeah. By the way, like till then, while we are doing this, let me just quickly go ahead and do that. Do we have any questions in the meantime? Like if you want to kind of quickly just address any questions, till then I'll just go ahead and add this code over here. So this should take me a couple of minutes. But till then, if anyone has any questions regarding what we have covered so far, like if anyone wants to know more about like what pieces does, I'll be more than happy to answer those questions in the meanwhile.
I would like to
So
ask like how pieces got started and how was the idea and when you joined as a developer relations as a developer what steps you took as and then how this idea of pieces of building pieces and how these new features implementation like all in brief.
yeah, so that's a pretty good question. So I mean, like the idea behind pieces kind of started with this entire product called Mesh. So of course, like that's the main company, how Savo and the other folks like Mac they kind of started. So at the start, it was like basically how you can make code snippet sharing. Like that is the main goal. To make a really easy way of being able to do code snippet sharing, because that's something that can be extremely difficult. So as we kind of mentioned it at the start of the presentation, that sharing of code amongst team members without any context can take a lot of time. It's just not very productive. So how can we make developers more productive? Like that was a single goal. And of course, like over time, as we kind of also see like how we utilize AI, now of course, like from being a code snippet manager and AI driven code snippet manager, now it's like how you can leverage pieces across your entire end to end developer workflow. And that's what we are basically showcased today through this example, right? So that's how kind of it has evolved in time. So I hope that that kind of answers the question.
Yeah.
And yeah, so if there are any other questions as well, I'll be more than happy to answer. So I'm just going ahead and pushing this code. So yeah, this should be now there. Let me go ahead and just present my screen again. All right, perfect. So yeah, I think this should be uploaded now. So you can see that I do have my client folder and all of the backend files that will be used to write the code. So we'll be pushing all of our code over here. So of course, right now, as you can see that at this very moment, of course, like the functionality is not there, but just to kind of give a glimpse of like what exactly we are going to be doing is, so we have this front end application where I'll be basically having a number of different functions. So of course, like one function is to display all of our notes. So to display all of our notes, we'll be of course like using Axios to of course call to our backend API. And then of course like we have a function add to basically add a new item. So in this case, like this new item is a new note alongside the author of that particular note. right? And then of course like all the different UI components are defined over here. Now of course if I'm like, let's say, creating a new backend application, and I like, let's say I'm trying to use MongoDB for the first time, right, ever. So perhaps I can try to search online for how to connect MongoDB to Node.js. Because let's say that I am a really good front end developer, but I am not necessarily a really great back end developer, right? So I want to understand, like, okay, like I have designed my front end application and I'll go ahead and create it. But like, let's say I want to search online that how do I connect MongoDB with Node.js. And I can either, of course, like ask it directly on, Google, and then, of course, like spend a lot of time in trying to find the right kind of answer. For example, like in this case, you have like the MongoDB link over here, which says that you first have to create a Node.js application and use like the Mongo client that require, the MongoDB npm module, and then have like a connection URI, which is like, either it could be a local connection, or if you're using like MongoDB Atlas, it could be a remote connection as well. So now the great thing about pieces is that there is also the pieces web extension. So I can actually go ahead and enable that pieces web extension over here for this particular documentation. And now if you see that, like this is a code snippet that will be definitely useful for me in order to basically connect to my, to utilize this particular code in order to actually connect to that instance, MongoDB instance. So what I can do is I can basically copy and save this particular code snippet, and I can also actually ask any question about, this particular code snippet. So what I'm doing over here is that if I click on this ask copilot button, what it's doing is that it is using the large language model in this case, which is GPT-4, and the prompt that I've given is like explain this particular code snippet. So you can see that it gives me a response that, what this particular code snippet does. So in this case, it's essentially first leveraging the MongoDB object to import this particular object from the MongoDB official Node.js driver, and then we set the URI for the actual instance for where our MongoDB database is hosted, whether you are having a remote instance, or like, let's say if you are running MongoDB locally, so it will be a local URI, right? And it just gives you this entire explanation. So of course, like you can add it, ask it more questions as well. But of course, like at this point in time, I'm basically saving this particular code snippet because this will definitely be useful for me when I'm trying to utilize this particular code snippet when I'm going to be dealing with my backend server, right? Because I, like, let's say I'm not really that well or that well equipped to, like, let's say, create my own like backend. So that is why, like, this is where now pieces can really help me. So now the first thing was that I have saved this particular code snippet. So now actually I can leverage that same code snippet that I just saved uh, via, so now the great thing is that if I save this, I don't have to again come and search on Google that, hey, like how do I connect to MongoDB, because now this code snippet is centrally saved throughout my list of pieces. So if I go ahead and now take a look at all of my list of snippets that I have. For example, you can see that, there's this MongoDB movie query where now what it does is that it shows me that yes, I have basically saved this over here. You can see the list of all the relevant you know snippets, and then of course like some related people whom I can reach out to, and I can leverage this anywhere that I want, right? There are a lot of like different tags that are also generated, right? So I can leverage this particular code snippet anywhere that I want, and at any time, so I don't have to again go and to the internet and search for something. Now the great thing is that this entire workflow also kind of transitions pretty well from your web browser to your VS Code. So there's like a dedicated VS Code plugin or an extension for pieces where you can see the list of all of the different extensions, or the code snippets that you have basically generated right over here, like in this example. And then you also get the access to the pieces copilot. So if we quickly open it up over here, let me bring it up so I can open up pieces copilot. So for example, like let's say I want to ask over here, perhaps like I'm probably new to this VS Code, like front end code, and I want to like ask, okay, can I perhaps improve this particular code, right? So I can click on pieces, I can ask, click on Copilot, and I can ask it like, hey, can I improve this particular code, right? So it will give you a suggestion. So this is the Copilot window, the pieces Copilot window for for this one. So of course, like over here, it will give you like some kind of some kind of details on how you could perhaps improve it. But of course, what I can do is I can create a pieces copilot and set the context for, and I can of course like choose between the different type of copilot runtimes. So in this case, like let's say go ahead and choose GPT-4, and now I can actually set context for the entire repository as well. So if I go ahead and click on what do I want to set the context for? So I can set it over here. So like basically set the context. So I can set the context for the entire folder. So in this case, let's go ahead and choose this entire folder as my context. So it will add all of these particular snippets, all the particular code. And now I can ask any relevant question to the pieces copilot about this entire code, right? So for instance, now like let's say if I were to ask that, hey, um, can you help improve this code, right? This code snippet. So of course, like it will, give you a response. So of course, like it says that the code is already pretty clean, and then it just gives you some simple code, and of course, like you can see that it also gives you the improved code as well, right? So you get essentially a inbuilt like chat gpt like experience, but the great thing is that it has context for not only like this particular file but your entire directory. And of course you can set context whether you want to set it for a simple at the directory level, or at just a particular function level, or even at like let's say simply at a folder level. So you can set that context as you want. Now of course, coming back, we have our front end application ready, but let's go and actually start to implement our backend. So the first thing that I did as part of my research was I wanted to set the MongoDB connectivity with my backend. So in that case, I can actually go to my connect Mongo. Now over here, this is where I would like to use my code snippet that I imported, right? So I can go and actually go to pieces, and basically I can explore a lot of the different snippets that I have, and I can actually go ahead and insert it. So for instance, like let's say I want to insert the snippet for the so I can like let me just go ahead and add this over here. So let's take a look at the snippet that I perhaps wish to add, and you can see like that particular snippet was over here, which is this MongoDB movie query, right? So I can search specifically for like let's say a particular snippet that I wish to add, right? So I can add that particular snippet. So like let's say if I simply go ahead and see over here, if I just refresh this, so you can see like the latest code snippet is this one. So now I can actually go ahead and insert this. So I can basically just go ahead and copy this entire snippet that's present. And like let's say if I wish to use it, I can simply copy it and add it to our Connect Mongo. So over here, like now I have added this. Of course, like a lot of this particular code will perhaps not be relevant for us. So I primarily just need a function where I can connect to the database. So in this case, like let's say I would of course like need this particular this particular uh, np module. So let's also just go ahead and ensure that we have this particular module installed. So I can just go ahead and do an npmi to install the relevant module. So in this case, let me ensure, yeah, perfect. So I've gone ahead and installed this particular module. Now I would need essentially the MongoDB URI. So in this case, the URI that I have, like I already have one that is prepared for myself, and I'll be basically leveraging that. So in this case, let me just go ahead and fetch that over here. So of course, like if you want to, like, let's say set up a MongoDB instance, you can go to mongodb.com. Let's go ahead and like create a new database on MongoDB, right? So um, you can go ahead and like use any type of database. So in this case, like since I'm using MongoDB, you can sign up for it and install it either locally, or of course, if you are using MongoDB Atlas, that would be a remote connectivity. So I already have my MongoDB URI. So let me just go ahead and add that over here. So this is like a global one. So let me just quickly add this over here. And I'll just quickly add this over here. So this is one that I created for pieces. So we'll be adding this cluster value. So this is something that I already created. And let me just go ahead and add this. Um, hopefully this should work. MongoDB.net. Okay, perfect. So now what I can actually go ahead and do is, so once you have basically set your URI, now of course, like I don't need actually most of this function, because of course this is like just a sample code. The main thing that I really want to focus on is that, hey, since I'll be connecting to Mongo, I will basically export a function from this so that I can use it inside of my server.js, which will be my main express file. So let me just perhaps remove all of this particular code, and what I can do is I can now actually ask pieces that I can ask pieces copilot over here that, hey, instead of this function, create an export function, like let's say connect to db, right, which takes in the Mongo URI. Okay, and then it can connect to the mongoose, right, to mongoose, to the URI, and it will export our connect to db function to be used by server.js. So like let's say if we are able to generate a code snippet so that we don't have to basically use connect to db. So of course you can see like it helps us to basically create this over here, where now it is generating this particular code. So of course, like it still kind of gives us the code that is related to this, but of course, like we can save this as well. So it also actually gives us like how we will use this in our server.js file, right? So it gives you that context over here, because it of course like is now having context to the entire repository. So of course like it can give you that. So I'll just go ahead and copy this. Now of course like there are a number of different features within the actual VS Code. For instance, like let's say I can simply go ahead and insert this code inside the terminal, or if I wish to directly add it. So you can see that I directly add it to my instance over here, right? So I can go ahead and remove this as well. Now, of course, in my case, like what I need is I don't like require this over here, so I can use over here. Like for example, I don't need this, and then I can insert this URI directly inside of my connect to DB. I can remove this perhaps. Of course, like the first thing is that we are now of course invoking the client. So instead of like using like let's say this try and catch method, instead of like using like let's say uh, Mongo client, I perhaps want to use mongoose, right? So I can also like ask it that instead of Mongo client, I want to use mongoose. So, and like let's say it will then generate uh, it will give you with mongoose. So now let's try to just go ahead and use this approach, because like let's say I don't want to use Mongo client, I want to use mongoose. So I can also go ahead and actually use mongoose. So let's go ahead and take this piece of code, because I think like this one is relevant. So I can go ahead and again insert this as well. So I'll just remove all of this and I'll add it over here. So in this case, like we'll have the mongoose over here. Then we'll have the mongo URI. So for that, I'll just quickly remove this code again, uh, ensure that this is saved. So just take this over here. Um, take this piece of code, which is our URI, right? Um, Go ahead and add it here inside of our connect to DB function. All right, perfect. Now, next thing that we'll do is that we have to basically connect. So, right, we'll be using the mongoose.connect. So, actually, don't require like a try catch block. I can directly just use the mongoose.connect in which I'll be passing the URI. And right now, I don't need anything over here. So, this can be empty because I just want to connect to the actual, and then I can use an arrow function. And over here, this basically define, that like, let's say, just put a simple console.log database connected successfully. Perfect. Now, I can go ahead and do this. So once I'm done, completing this, I can simply go ahead and close this as well. So, and hopefully this should work. So I can actually remove all of this because I don't actually require all of this movie data because this is something that is coming from the existing one. So hopefully this should work. Close this out. So let's see if this works. Think, okay, my bad. All right, so this should be fine now. So I think we are done specifically with like trying to handle this aspect. So I can just close this as well. I think this now it should be fine. Perfect. So what we have done is that we have created our mongoose connection, right? Now we can also go ahead and define our schema. So right, so like I want to define a schema. So I can also ask like the copilot, can you help with the basic schema definition or MongoDB, perhaps like schema for a note taking application, which will accept an author and then body of the note. So it can help us to kind of create that in Node.js, right? So of course, like we need the author, and then we need basically apart from the author, we need the body of that particular note. So we can go ahead and ask that particular question. So we'll just wait for it to kind of add. And again, like at this point in time, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Yeah, so we'll just wait for till that time to like if anyone has any questions. Let me just go ahead and try to refresh this. Yeah, so this gives us like a basic schema. So I can also perhaps like just go ahead and copy this and add it over here. So in this case, like we can see that we have the node schema. Actually, we can call it like whatever schema that we want. So in this case, we're calling it the node schema, and you can see like it has the author of the type string and then body of the type string. So or in this, like we can probably just rename it as notes because like every author will have their note. So you can also like perhaps like add a default value. So if you want to add like let's say a default value that would be empty by default, you can set like a default value as well. So in this case we set it over here and then you can set another default value. So this looks good. And then we can of course we don't need to actually initialize it over here. We'll directly initialize this inside of our server.js. And for example now or actually what we can do is that's fine, we can use this is fine. So this would be a model would be our node schema, and then we are initializing it and we are exporting it. So now this could be used inside of our server.js. So coming to the main like server.js, of course, like over here, what we have to essentially do is define our define the endpoints that we'll be using. So of course, like one of the endpoints would be to create a new post, and then there would be a separate endpoint to fetch all of the different nodes that we have, right? So far we have created the two main files, which is connecting to our MongoDB, and of course like creating a schema for our MongoDB database. So let's go ahead and actually now create the schema. In this case, I think we can probably just change this to user schema, because since we're dealing with user, and then we can define this as like, let's say, a user, and then over here we can define a user schema, and we can call, like, let's say this particular as a user. So I think that would be fine. Right, perfect. So once we have done this, right, we'll go ahead and implement our server.js. So of course, like in this case, we'll need, we can perhaps try to, again, if I'm not that great over here, I can, because this particular Copilot instance has access to all the repository, I can ask it, hey, can you help with the creation of the server.js, right? Which will of course, like, use the, so I'm just giving it a prompt to help me with this, which will use the cause and express framework, right? And should have essentially two endpoints, right? So one would be a post endpoint to create a new note, right? And let's say it will have another endpoint, which will be a get endpoint, right? Get endpoint to fetch the list of all the nodes. So this will be there. And then, of course, we can also mention that it will use the mongoose schema defined for nodes. Let's see if it can give us the context based on the rest of the code. So
शिवाय इको हो रहा है.
is there echo? Okay.
Yes, it's an echo.
Let me just see. Okay, is it better now?
Yes, it's good, better now.
Okay, perfect. So as you can see that, it gives you like this particular example of this code, where we have like this express server, and I can go ahead and actually save it as well to Mongo, right? So I can save it as well. uh, if I want to copy it, I can also go ahead and save this to my code snippet, right? So now let's go ahead and actually insert this over here. So we have the express, we have cores. Of course, like we are assuming that the node model. So in this case, of course, like we are not having this particular model itself, but we will be like having a connect function. So const connect, which will basically require my dot connect, right? So of course, like in this case, I want the connect dot connect Mongo. So this is what we are going to be using. In this case, we're going to be using this particular directory to connect to our MongoDB instance. So this was good. Then we kind of set, and of course, like we'll just set app.use express.jar. This is good. So we're using express. So of course, like the first thing that we now can simply do is we can define the actual schema. So in this case, we'll say const user is equal to require, and over here we'll import the schema, right? So dot schema. So this should allow us to get the schema in there, and then of course, like since we are already getting the connectivity, right? You don't need to add this again, because we already have the connectivity being defined inside the connect. So we also don't need this mongoose. We can directly use connect. So of course, now the first thing that we see is we need like app.post. So that is like the first endpoint with the hashtag notes. Let's just probably keep it just straightforward. Like we don't need to like give it a name to the URL. So now we can see that it's request response. So in this case, like const, we have new body. We have the new note with which will accept the author and the body over here. So in this case, like since our schema um, is not having body, it has notes, right? So we can just change this over here. So this will be notes. And one more thing that we'll probably want to do is that once we have defined a new note, right, we would want it to be basically like save it, right? So we want it to also get saved. So once we go ahead and create it, so before this, like let's just define a simple request body over here. So I can just say a const here, so request body will be equal to this like dot body, so that we can save it. And now, like before we go ahead and save it, I would also just want to quickly save this note. So over here, like that has been defined. So we'll just wait for the new note to save, and we will return the JSON, right? So this is good. Similarly, if you want to find all of the notes, in this case, like since our is user, so we'll define it over here. So this would be like, let's say the note list, and we'll return the note list over here. So we'll just basically return this particular response. This is containing the entire note list. And then this looks good. So hopefully this should be good enough for us to kind of start. So as you can see, like in a nutshell, what we have done is we have two separate endpoints, one for creating a new note, then we have a separate endpoint for saving all of our notes. I'll go ahead and actually just stop our client, and in the client we also have to make one change. So first let's just try to see if our backend server actually starts to work. So we'll just go ahead and try to run that. So if I do npm start, just to kind of see, there might be an issue. Note is not defined. Okay, so this might be because it's user. So new user. And similarly, it might be over here. Okay, perfect. This time is fine. So let's try to run this. Models.export note. Okay, so this will be user. Right, address already in use. And perhaps give it some other URL, right? Let's say 4600.
Yeah, we can port to some other URL.
Yeah, perfect. So looks like it works fine. So I can now define this in my app over here. So I need to define this endpoint to add new notes, and of course, like to fetch all of our notes. So I'll just go ahead and give it http localhost 100, and then similarly I'll give this over here as well. Okay, so if this works, let's go ahead and go and start to run this application. Let's see if we are able to get this running. Of course, perfect. So let's see that if this works well now. I can go ahead and just check my console. So it does throw some error. Let me just confirm if it's coming up right now as well. Localhost. It's okay. Let's try to run this. So I'll say Shivai, and let me just also open the network. Okay, so it's throwing an error. Let me just quickly see what might be the issue. User validation path notes is required. Okay, so it might give us some sort of over here. So it does not throw this particular error, but I can copy this particular issue, and like let's say try to see like if the Copilot is able to actually help us, right? With pieces, Copilot can actually help us with this error. So if I kind of just give this particular issue, All right. So you can see like it can, you can ask it for errors as well. But in our case, it says that user validation paths notes is required. So in this case, let's just quickly see if where exactly that error might be coming in, because we have this might have used it somewhere. Was This was like the code that was generated by, so this is the notes, right? So yeah, like the issue over here. So yeah, this would be notes. Okay, body. So yeah, this might be because we have notes. Because in our schema we had notes and it was trying to use request.body. So I think like that is the major problem. Let's try to resolve this and run it again. So hopefully this time it runs. I think it still does give some issue, but let's try to see if it works this time. So let's add an author. All right. So this time it still failed. Let's just check if it is giving some error. And of course, like in this case, like you can again, like if you're facing certain issues, if you kind of like face a bug, right, you can directly like ask Copilot to solve it. For example, like let's say if I add something over here, right, now you can basically ask Copilot to fix it for you. So pieces like can leverage the, like especially for VS Code, you can leverage it to also like fix any error that you might have. Like let's say sometimes you're debugging the application, and you can have like a quick fix for that as well. But let's try to just quickly see if we're able to get this resolved. Um, so it threw an error. Took some time to render this. Um, so this particular operation is actually getting timed out. That's pretty interesting. Just let's quickly check what might be causing this particular issue. So it's definitely happening in our endpoint for creating a new note. So let's just quickly take a look. We have the request.body and we are creating a new note over here. So this should be fine. Over here, instead of the try catch, let's just first try to see if we are able to wait for our new note. So new note here dot so we'll just go ahead and use save. Then we'll just return the status over here. Return rest.json and true. Let's see if this kind of works. Hopefully this should solve this issue. For some reason, it's still kind of uses. Let me just ensure that we're connecting to the correct endpoint.
Check if there's any typo. Or because sometimes the typo mistakes.
Yeah, actually, sometimes like typos
Yeah.
might cause that particular issue. So just want to ensure that this is still
And
kind of
also,
giving
it's
this.
sometimes it becomes hard to find and causes a lot of.
Yeah, because it cannot actually find the localhost 4600. I just want to ensure that in our server we get this up and running. So looks good on this end. 4600 is fine.
Can we change the port back to the initial, like what it was, and then we can change the port, the same port which was using in that.
Yeah, actually also like one of the things that I feel is actually not working is that in this case, like we also want to ensure that we are able to get like the connect over here, right? Because we
Yeah.
want to basically like so yeah, I'm just seeing that if what
Can
might,
we do console log anyway?
yeah, I
We
think
can.
like that might make sense. So let's go ahead and just add like a control log over here. See if like we actually do have anything coming in,
Yeah.
the new new note over here. So let's try to see if this works. Right, let's refresh. All right. So we can see that uh, it is, of course, like sending the request, but of course, like
It's
it's just
echoing,
timing out.
Shiva. Shiva, it's echoing.
So you can see that there is a MongoDB error which says like operation got timed out. So let's just quickly see that what might be causing this particular issue. Um, oh, so I think probably the reason why it might be doing is that we have not connected over here. So let's just go ahead and also once you have done this right. So apart from like defining the port, we want basically two things, right? So I think that the reason why it didn't was because we didn't connect it over here. So I think this should fix it. So let's also just initialize our connect function so that we are able to actually connect to the MongoDB. So I think like the reason why it is giving that particular error was that we hadn't connected to the MongoDB instance. So I think like that was perhaps like the major reason why it didn't work. So
It's echoing.
can you is it better now? One second.
Still echoing.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, okay, all right. So the reason was that we had actually not initialized our MongoDB, right? So that was perhaps the reason why it ended up like giving that particular issue. So now, of course, like what we'll end up doing is so we'll just use request.body, right? Okay, perfect. Let's actually remove this. Hopefully now it should work because now we have actually connected to our MongoDB instance because it was throwing that particular error. So let's go ahead and start the server again and see if it works. Is it giving the same error? Okay, so this time it did end up getting like the data true, but now I think there might be some other error that might be coming up, but we can quickly just take a look at the network. So see, like officially we were able to generate, but it still doesn't render the actual endpoint. So I think like the next thing that we just have to quickly see is what might be the cause of like doing that. So let's just take a quick look at our notes over here as well. So in this case, like we have the app.get. This we don't actually need this. So perhaps this might be the reason. Okay, let's now try to run this again because in our endpoint we didn't use like the notes endpoint. So let's try this out one last time. Okay, so perfect. So this time we got our note and I can add like let's say a new note. So should I let's say perfect. So this time it works. So like we have been successfully able to like create this note. So it just took a bit of debugging to resolve that particular issue. But as you can see, like the main point that we kind of wanted to kind of portray or showcase was that how easily you can first start off with some research work and then save those particular code snippets directly inside of your these snippets, the list of snippets, and then of course like you can use the powerful functionality of the Copilot to give you context and kind of just help you write code better because of course like in this case like let's say you were not very aware of backend, so you can leverage it to explain code or perhaps like tinker your code to make it slightly better. You can request it to like explain or resolve any issues that might be there inside of your code. So in this case, for example, you you can get like annotations on like how to improve a particular code, right? So these are some of the main ways in which you can leverage pieces. And of course like as you're kind of sharing any code snippet, right, you can now share it with the team member and that will enable you to like make it better. So this is like one example like when you're building kind of a live project, and uh, of course like we kind of described what are the benefits as well. So for example like the main point really is that whether you want like it to document code snippets or you're collaborating or you're trying to solve your program with the help of like large language models, so you can use like leverage pieces over there. And if there are any other questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those questions. But at the same time, I'll request everyone to join our Discord, because in our Discord, like, we have a bunch of like really interesting things. For example, like, of course, we have a dedicated section for our open source. So we have an open source library. So of course, like, if you ever wish to like contribute to pieces, like, we have an open source repository where, of course, like, we are open sourcing a lot of like different SDKs. So you can actually contribute to all the different SDKs that are there, right? So there are like number of different SDKs that are available, to which you can actually contribute to. And apart from that, you can, of course, like, just join the Discord if you have any questions regarding the product. Our team will be there to kind of help you. But yes, we are really kind of expanding on the open source side. So if you have any project ideas that you might want to wish to build with pieces, you can also uh, do that. Or of course, like, you just want to contribute to some of the SDKs and just be part of a vibrant developer community, then you can join that. But I'll be now like open to questions.
That's really awesome. And I would like everyone to do start contributing in open source in the open source repositories of pieces, and to join the Discord community. I will share the all the links in the description soon, and you may check back that later. And meanwhile, guys, if you have any questions, please drop in the chat so that we can take up one by one and then answer your questions and then go ahead. Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, thank you, Susmita, for hosting me, and I think like that is really helpful. But yeah, if there are any questions, I'll be more than happy to take up those questions.
Yeah, it was my pleasure to have you on my channel.
Absolutely.
Thanks to Ankit and Joy for staying with us. Folks, if you have any questions, please drop in the chat. Apart from that, shall we just talk about the pricing part, which is going to launch
Yeah, so
next year?
like, we are still kind of in that process of finalizing the pricing. We did launch like a kind of a we did ask on Discord, right? Like, hey, what do you think about the pricing? So we're still kind of finalizing that. But of course, like, what we really want to focus is on how pieces kind of helps individual developers and also helps out teams in general, right? So I think like the pricing should come pretty soon in the next, like, the first quarter of 2024. But yeah, I'll suggest like you should definitely stay in. You can join the Discord to know when that kind of launches. But of course, for now, everything is free, so you can use pieces for free, whether you're using your local large language models or if you're using like even ChatGPT for your pieces Copilot. So everything is free for now. But yeah, like, it'll definitely be pretty, like, good for like developers to start using it, and especially for like teams who wish to expand the uses of pieces across different teams. Because of course, like, whether you talk about trying to understand a particular code snippet, or you're trying to share it across, as we kind of saw, right, that you were able to maintain that context from the MongoDB website, where I copied that particular code and saved the code snippet for how to connect to a Mongo's connection. That particular same context was inside of my VS Code as well. And then, of course, like, once I set the context for my entire VS Code repository, I was able to get suggestions and code snippets that were relevant by taking a look at my entire code repository, rather than just perhaps uh, giving like a random code. So of course, like, that definitely helps save a lot of time for developers, whether you are like looking at the entire end-to-end code generation, or if you're just like kind of wanting to tweak certain aspects of your code, or like perhaps even like do a quick bug fix, which might take you more time to do on something like searching on Google or on Stack Overflow.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And okay, since there are no questions yet, do you like to share anything more about pieces?
No, I think like perhaps like the best one is that, of course, like, we have these you know monthly open source meetups as well. So if you're a beginner and you want to get started by contributing, so just join our Scalar Discord, our pieces Discord, and then by joining that Discord, you will be able to not only get introduced to all the like different ecosystems, but of course like to the open source community as well, where if you are wanting to contribute to one of the pieces SDKs, or you want to contribute to one of the community projects that we are building. So we are really pushing for more community open source projects as well, that are being built around the pieces OS, because the pieces OS, as I mentioned, like is kind of the brain behind, right? So every single code snippet has so many different things, like it has a number of different assets, so you can visualize them. You can build your own custom plugins, like the new vim plugin that doesn't exist. Perhaps you can use one of the SDKs, like the Python SDK, to create like a CLI uh, application for pieces. So it's like the capability is limitless, right? And we have had some of these open source meetups where some of our developers who are building these plugins or the core pieces itself, like they will come and do some live hands-on as well. So definitely join those as well. But yeah, like there are tons of like examples to kind of get started with building some sample projects with pieces, and of course like a lot of more open source SDKs are on the way. So definitely join the Discord, and if you wish to contribute to one of these SDKs or to any of the startup projects, then that'll be a great opportunity for you to kickstart your journey into open source and work towards like a tool that's meant for improving developer productivity.
Did we talk about the security practices while working with pieces? Because there are two kinds of, one can work in the cloud and one can also work locally.
Yeah. So I think like we did kind of cover that when we were giving a overview of the entire tool. So as you mentioned, Susmita, like essentially with Pieces Copilot, you can choose between either on device model, so that these are like the local large language models that run locally in your device. They are not sending any data to a remote server. So even if you have your internet connectivity shut down, then you can still leverage them, right? And they're a great thing because of course like let's say if you're going on a very long flight or you're in an area where you don't have good network, you can still leverage AI help in order to get context and just be more efficient, right? And of course you can also use the cloud based models, which use either GPT or uh, you know uh, we'll be also having in the future support for like Gemini. We already have support for, like for the Palm B2 APIs. You can also leverage those, or even like let's say connect to your own custom GPT key. If you're having like an optimized version of GPT, like you can bring in your own GPT model as well and leverage that as well by adding your own open API key.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Like, you can have it two ways.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that gives you more because I know like
more
a lot of
power.
companies more power, and it's also like because a lot of organizations might not want to send their data to a chat GPT or a GPT, right? They might want to leverage local models because of privacy concern. So because with local models you're not really sending your data anywhere outside. And the great thing about how pieces kind of also kind of pieces together everything is that it uses retrieval augmented generation. So as you're kind of giving it more context, it becomes more contextually aware about your entire code, whether it's like the entire repository, or as we mentioned like one particular code, a code block, or even a file or a folder. So it kind of improves as you interact with it and as you add more snippets, right? So it improves over time. So the more you use it, like it will become more contextually aware of your habits, and of course like the particular directories or the repositories that you're working with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, if there are any further questions, please do join the Discord, and I'll be there, and a bunch of other folks from the community will be there to kind of help you out.
Yeah, and to share your learnings, what you have learned today, take a screenshot of this session and post it on Twitter, LinkedIn, and all kinds of socials. Tag me, tag Shivai, Shivai at the how develop, and also do tag the pieces at the get pieces on Twitter, and on LinkedIn you will get pieces for developers. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Keep learning in public.
Yeah, keep learning, public. That's the main thing. Keep
Yeah,
building and
that's
keep learning. Yeah. Because only learning is also not the best, right? You also have to keep learning, like keep building as well. Like as you learn, you build,
Yeah.
right? So build as you learn. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, one should always build while they learn, and also post their daily updates on socials like hashtag learn in public. It also helps. It also increases the person profile as proof of work of personal branding, and also helps in other possible ways.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed this session, and see you in some other video and live sessions.
All right.
Bye.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.